This is the Ohio Farm Bureau podcast. I'm Ty Higgins. 20 Ohio Farm Bureau leaders have been named to the 2024 Ohio Farm Bureau Federation Policy Development Committee. The committee collects and organizes public policy recommendations from county farm bureaus and presents the final policy suggestions to be voted on by Ohio Farm Bureau's delegates during the state annual meeting coming up in December. Representing Columbiana County on that PD committee was Stacy Irwin. She joins us on the podcast. Stacy, great to see you. Welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Can't wait to talk about some of the things that you all discussed in committee and some of the policies coming to the floor in December at annual meeting. Before we do, give us an introduction of yourself and your involvement there in Columbiana County with Farm Bureau.
I am the Columbiana County Board President. I've been on the Farm Bureau since 2018. I worked initially as the Secretary Treasurer, and I'm entering my second year now as the Board President for Columbiana County.
We talk a lot through Ohio Farm Bureau circles about grassroots and how what we do at the state level comes from the county level, and our members are our voice. This is the epitome of that. As I mentioned, counties like Columbiana County and the other 85 counties across the state collect policy at the local level and bring it to the state level. Talk about you being a part of the process at the state level. You mentioned you're involved very heavily at the county level. You see these policies coming up through the ranks, and now you see by being a part of this committee how the process works.
Initially, the counties do reach out to their members and ask for any policy changes that are submitted then to the county level. The counties then sit in a meeting and go over those policies and see if they're addressed in our policy manual, if there's room for there to be addressed in the policy manual. And then from that level, the policies are then passed on to the state staff and the state level. So 20 of us gathered together in September and October, and we reviewed the policies that were submitted from the individual counties, looking at them as a committee, and how they would fit and how we could address them in our policy manual to take to the delegate body for the final vote in December.
Was it what you expected when you were asked to be a part of policy development and getting that state level and seeing all of the other policies coming in from across the state? Was it what you had in mind when you got involved?
It is what I expected because I've been on policy at our county level for many times, but I did appreciate that they came to us just as they were written from those counties. They were just as the people wanted them. And then we looked at them and said, okay, how can we address this and fit it into our book or change the policy that we have, if necessary, to fit the needs of the individual people that have submitted these requests.
One of the things that always fascinates me is that the different types of policies coming from every part of the state, right? What's important to Northeast Ohio is going to be a little bit different than what's important to Southwest Ohio. But as far as consistencies, the things that came from all parts of the state, policy development wise, were there any of those really underlying common threads that we saw from members all across Ohio?
What I noticed was land use management is important to all areas of Ohio and how the land is being used. Also farmland preservation. How is Farm Bureau going to use their voice to keep farmland in the hands of farmers, through their policy book and through the stances that they take at the state house or at the, even up to the national level.
What are some of the other policies you looked at? The ones you just mentioned, they're priority issues for us. Farmland preservation and landowner rights, of course, are bread and butter for Ohio Farm Bureau members as far as the importance of that policy. What are some other things that maybe have bubbled up to the top over the past couple of years that our members are starting to pay attention to?
I would say one of the most important issues is solar. And use of the farmland to be put into a solar array. That is a very heavy topic that we've been discussing for years in my county alone. We've learned so much about solar and, how the land is leased, and then how the solar arrays are placed. And this is something that we actually discuss at every single one of our county meetings. Where are we with solar, and are there any changes locally to the things that are being asked for or implemented? Other topics, I was on the environmental stewardship portion committee. Our policy book is divided into 5 sections. And so I was in section 5, which is environmental stewardship. And some things that we talked about were cover crop management and seeding of cover crops. Also, we did discuss another big topic that is present throughout the state, which is CO2 sequestration and use of land for CO2 sequestration, and how these big companies are placing these devices on property.
One of the fascinating things about being part of policy development committee is that you hear from experts. Of course, Ohio Farm Bureau, we have our experts in every category that is in our policy book, but to hear from third-party experts about what's happening on the ground, what are some of the things you might have heard from experts during your time at policy development that maybe you didn't realize, and maybe one of the key takeaways from meeting those experts throughout these meetings?
Some of the experts that came in and spoke with us, we discussed annexation. We also discussed at length CO2 sequestration, which we then brought back into our policy committee meeting and discussed further. I didn't know a lot about that. I didn't understand it or even realize, how it was used with these some of these larger companies that are drilling, then have to they find the need to balance their energy consumption by sequestering carbon into the ground. So very close to these sites where they drill, they will put another site where they actually drill even further down into the earth, and they will pump the carbon down into the ground very, very deep for storage. I found that fascinating. And I even took that back to my county, and I was like, do you guys know that they're doing this? And explained it to them, and they had even never really heard what it was. But some companies are approaching people with property and asking them, can we put one of these on your property and put that CO2 into the ground underneath your land? And so that's something that we all need to know about, that is a possibility.
How much was talked about how impactful these policies are to the future of Ohio agriculture?
That came up with every policy. How will this affect our members? Do our members think, is this the way that they think? Or, I would say that came up with every single policy. Every Ohio agriculture was the foremost topic. And, how is this going to affect the Farm Bureau members? And what are they going to think about this when we bring it to them at the annual meeting this year?
Did it give you a new sense of appreciation for what the organization does?
Yes, for sure. You see at the local level, we do a lot of programming, we do a lot of education, and we hear, people do call to the Farm Bureau office and ask questions, but, this book is what drives how they answer those questions. And, to see that one person could write on a piece of paper, we want to get rid of a county program that we don't appreciate, writing that down and sending that to your county, and then your county sends that on to our policy development team, and it can end up in that book. And so then if someone from the state level calls the office, or a member calls the office, we can say, this is, what our people want, and this is, how we stand on it. I really appreciated that. And it's from a group effort. It's what do the people want? It's not from one individual person or, a smaller group of people. It was from everyone. And we all sat together at the end. And after we reviewed these policies in our small groups, we got together as a large group and went line by line over every change that we had made. And, looking at not only grammar and punctuation, but also, I'm not sure that the members in my area would think this way. Let's discuss. And then we would have those discussion and change the sentences around, or even some sentences were removed because we would vote on that as a group, and it was a group from all over the state, which was wonderful.
Days of hard work and countless hours going into policy development, and all that work will be displayed on the delegate floor at annual meeting in the middle of December, where Ohio Farm Bureau members will take a look at these policy recommendations and make that decision whether it belongs in our policy book or not. And even some of these policies will get moved up to the national level at American Farm Bureau's annual convention in January. Stacy Irwin was part of the policy development committee. She is from Columbiana County. Great to have you on here, and thank you so much for the insights. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you so much.
Who feeds your need for new ideas for your family's best farm future? Ohio Farm Bureau. We work with our members to shape ag policy that will positively impact our industry. Farm Bureau is advancing business solutions to give you a competitive advantage. We help you gather information to stay ahead of important topics and technologies. Plus, Ohio Farm Bureau creates opportunities for growth. Ohio Farm Bureau, feeding your need for new ideas.
Find out how Nationwide Agribusiness can help you grow your business. Get to know the people with the experience and knowledge to help you. Whether you are looking to protect your farm or ranch from the ground up, or need someone who understands your changing commercial ag needs. Find out how to better manage the risks of your ag business, or how quickly you can get back to business. Learn how you can protect your next with Nationwide on your side.
Time's running out for thousands of farmers who may face steep fines and possible jail time for failing to file their businesses with the federal government as part of new rules through the Corporate Transparency Act. New analysis by American Farm Bureau economists show more than 230,000 farms are required to file, but government data indicates less than 11% of all eligible businesses nationwide have actually done so. Joining us for this Legal with Leah Curtis, Associate General Counsel with Ohio Farm Bureau. Leah, always great to see you.
Good to see you too.
So earlier this year, you and I talked about this, the Corporate Transparency Act, and you gave us a reminder about these tips and some deadlines coming up. Let's start with what the Corporate Transparency Act is and what it does mean for farmers.
Sure. So this law was passed in 2020, and the main point is to address money laundering. And I'll remind everyone that Farm Bureau did oppose this law, lobbied against it, but it did pass with pretty strong bipartisan support in Congress. So the law requires most businesses to report information about their owners, and that would include farm businesses. And the intent here is to make it harder to hide assets and to commit financial crimes, particularly through the use of things like shell companies.
So who needs to file and what should they file?
So any business that was created by filing a document with the Secretary of State or a similar office in the US is going to have to report. So if you organized your farm as an LLC, as a corporation, those were filed with the Secretary of State here in Ohio. And so you likely also need to file under the Corporate Transparency Act. You'll need to report information about beneficial owners, and those are people that have substantial control over the company or own 25% or more of the ownership interests. And for both the business and the beneficial owners, it's kind of basic information that you're reporting: your names, addresses, tax ID number, and then copies of identification like a driver's license. I do want to note that sole proprietorships typically are not going to be required to file because they typically do not file paperwork with the Secretary of State. But of course, everyone should talk to their own legal counsel and figure that out for their business individually.
And you and I bringing this up again because the deadline to do this is just a couple months away now.
Yeah, so we talked about this earlier this year, and the deadline is if your business was created prior to January 1, 2024, you have until January 1, 2025 to file this information. If you create a business sometime in 2024, you had 90 days from the date of creation to file this information. You should have gotten information about that. Hopefully you're working with an attorney and they gave you that information. There is ongoing litigation over this law, but at this time, it does appear it's going to remain in effect. So business owners should be making plans to get through this process. As you mentioned, there are very steep fines for non-compliance. There is possibilities of jail time. And so to be safe, we, want to remind everybody that they really should get moving on this process.
What do you want to caution people about when it comes to some issues that have unfortunately popped up with this requirement?
So just like we see with income taxes every year, people are sending out fake emails and things to get people's information. Same thing's happening here, like it does with a lot of these types of activities. Your actual filing should take place on the Financial Crime Enforcement Network webpage, and that is a federal government webpage, .gov at the end. Some of the fraud alerts that we've been made aware of from FinCEN include asking for a Form 4022. There is no such form, so please don't fill that out. Or asking for information from a U.S. Business Regulations Department. I think we can all know that the government would never make such a simple name for an agency. So that one is also not a real department, and you should not be providing information to anyone with that name. If you get emails or correspondence unsolicited about CTA, you really should be wary of any links or attachments or QR codes. They might be attempting to gain your information, and there is no fee for filing at FinCEN. So unless you're paying an attorney, an accountant, somebody that you have contracted and are working with directly, they shouldn't be asking you for money to file this information either.
We're in the heart of harvest season. Farmers are busy. They've already done a lot of paperwork this year. They're doing more paperwork because maybe they were impacted by the drought. There's a lot going on. So how can farmers get some help in doing this particular reporting?
So, of course, if you worked with an attorney to set up your business, that's probably a really good place to go to have them assist you with this filing. They're going to understand your business and your business structure, and they should be able to help you with this. You can do it yourself on the Financial Crimes Enforcement webpage. They have lots of resources there to explain it to you. And again, that website is FinCEN, FINCEN.gov. We also have a number of resources on our webpage, and we will link to, again, a market intel article from the American Farm Bureau Federation, our previous Legal with Leah, and then as well, our friends at OSU Extension have put out a bulletin as well that we will link to, and people can check those out.
Leah Curtis, Associate General Counsel with Ohio Farm Bureau, for this Legal with Leah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.